In August of 2012, when The Big Bang Theory was one of the most watched shows on all of American television, Mayim Bialik was sitting in an emergency room with her left hand completely crushed from a car accident. The doctors were not saying much out loud. They were just talking quietly to each other about whether they might need to do serious surgery just to save her fingers. The woman who had been making millions of people laugh every single week on their television screens was suddenly staring at a very scary question. If she lost the use of her hands, what would be left of everything she had built? At that point in time, most people only knew her as Amy Farrah Fowler, the dry and brilliantly funny scientist on the show. But in her real actual life, she was also a genuine neuroscientist with a real PhD degree, the kind of resume that Hollywood almost never sees, a real star with a real doctorate, someone who stood for intelligence and success in a way that felt completely different from everyone else around her. But the bright lights of a TV studio do not follow you into an emergency room. And a long list of achievements and awards cannot protect you from the feeling of being completely fragile and helpless when fame cannot save you from accidents, from bad choices, or from those moments when you are not even sure anymore who you really are underneath all of it. So why would a woman with such an incredibly strong science background, a stable and successful career, and a position that so many people genuinely admired, keep finding herself in these moments where all of that suddenly feels like it means absolutely nothing at all? This story does not start with any kind of scandal or dramatic explosion. It starts with a car crash, and from that moment forward the hidden layers of a very complicated life start slowly peeling back and showing themselves one by one. Before she ever became a familiar face on television screens across America, Mayim Bialik was just a Jewish girl growing up surrounded by Sabbath candles at family dinners and long conversations happening around the dining room table. She was born on December 12, 1975, in San Diego, California, and she grew up in the Los Angeles area inside an Ashkenazi Jewish family with deep roots going all the way back to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. Stories about migration and shared memory were just a normal and natural part of what she heard growing up every single day. Her father, Barry Bialik, was a high school teacher who also spent time making documentary films about real social issues happening in the world. He did not just hand knowledge to his students. He asked questions. He pushed people to debate and think for themselves. Her mother, Beverly, whose maiden name was Winnickelman, pushed hard for academic discipline and personal responsibility in everything. Their home was not the flashy, glamorous kind of Hollywood family that you might picture. It was a solid middle-class household where reading books, keeping traditions alive, and taking education seriously mattered a whole lot more than any dream of becoming famous. The family practiced Reform Judaism. When Mayim was 13 years old, she celebrated her bat mitzvah, which is the religious ceremony that marks the moment a Jewish girl officially comes of age. Keeping the Sabbath, following kosher food rules, and having a strong sense of belonging to a community gave her a very clear structure for how to live her life. Disciplined but not cut off from the world. Traditional but not completely separated from modern life either. At North Hollywood High School, she was not known for being flashy or trying to stand out with her looks. She was known for being seriously smart and getting excellent grades. In 1993, she graduated with really impressive results. When she got accepted to both Harvard and Yale, two of the most famous and prestigious universities in the entire country, she still chose UCLA so she could stay close to her family. That decision showed everyone that her priorities were not just about getting the most impressive name on her diploma. Staying connected and feeling stable mattered just as much to her. At UCLA, she studied neuroscience, finished her Bachelor of Science degree, and then went on to successfully defend her doctoral dissertation all the way back in 2007. That whole academic path was not some sudden random turn she took. It was the natural next step in a foundation that had been built for her very early in life, a foundation where knowledge was treated like a real responsibility and where your identity was something you absolutely could not trade away for anything easier or more comfortable. Mayim's childhood did not have any huge dramatic shocks or explosions in it. But that very steadiness and calm created a really solid base underneath her that would help her stay standing when life later became far more complicated and difficult than anything from those quiet Sabbath evenings of her younger years could have ever prepared her for. Before she became Blossom, Mayim Bialik was just a regular girl showing up to auditions and hoping for a shot. In the late 1980s, while she was still a teenager, she started getting small roles on television and in movies. There was no show business family backing her up or pushing her forward. There was no big master plan to turn her into a child star brand. Her very first film role was in a horror movie called Pumpkinhead back in 1988. It was a small part, just enough to teach her how to stand in front of a camera without completely falling apart. After that came scattered appearances on shows like MacGyver, Webster, and The Facts of Life. Each one was just a small trial step forward, not yet any kind of real promise of something bigger coming. The real turning point came from an opportunity that was honestly almost accidental. In 1990, she appeared in an episode of a show called Empty Nest. Her character got such a great response from the people watching that the producers decided to take that character and build an entirely separate show around her. From being just a guest in someone else's story, she became the actual center of the sitcom called Blossom. On screen in the early 1990s, Mayim played Blossom Russo, a teenage girl who was sharp, smart, quick-talking, quick-thinking, and always ready with a clever comeback for absolutely any situation that came her way. The show Blossom ran from 1990 all the way to 1995, turning her into a face that people all across America recognized and genuinely loved. That character created a kind of symbol, a teenage girl who did not get by on her looks or her appearance but on her brain and her personality. At a time when most teenage stars in Hollywood were being built entirely around how they looked, Blossom stood out in a completely different way because of how she thought. But that very quality put a quiet and unspoken kind of pressure on her shoulders that most people never really thought about. The public did not just want to watch her play a smart girl. They actually wanted her to truly be one in real life too. And at an age when most of her peers were still just trying to figure out who they even were, Mayim had to grow up right there under studio lights with constant judgment from every direction. She later admitted openly that she was never the kind of Hollywood teenager who went to parties or chased whatever the latest trend happened to be. She described herself as awkward and a lot more introverted than glamorous. In a world where your image basically determined your social value and your status, that quiet feeling of not entirely belonging there started forming inside her without making any noise at all. When Blossom ended in 1995, a lot of people just assumed she would keep climbing higher and higher in the entertainment industry. Instead, she completely changed direction. Not because she had failed at anything. Not because people had forgotten who she was. But simply because she wanted to be the one choosing her own identity for once. Mayim applied to college and got accepted to both Harvard and Yale, two of the most respected academic institutions on the entire planet. And yet she chose UCLA again so she could stay close to her family. That decision was not dramatic or loud or designed to impress anyone. It came from something much deeper than that. Stability and her own personal values genuinely mattered more to her than chasing the most impressive or prestigious-sounding name she could put on a certificate. In the years that followed, she almost completely disappeared from television. While so many other child stars from her era were desperately trying to hold on to public attention and stay relevant, Mayim walked into laboratories, studied neuroanatomy, wrote serious research papers, and pushed through extremely demanding academic exams. In 2007, she successfully defended her PhD dissertation in neuroscience at UCLA, with her research focusing on the nervous system and hormones during adolescence. For Hollywood, this was a story nobody had ever really seen before. A teenage television star who did not go back to school just for the image or the photo opportunity, but actually stepped away from the spotlight long enough to genuinely become a properly trained scientist. And for Mayim herself, it was never a rejection of her acting past. It was just the continuation of a part of who she had always been, a part that had existed long before any camera ever pointed at her face. She had chosen both worlds at different times. But during this chapter she chose silence. And inside that silence something rare and unusual started to take shape. A television star who genuinely had an independent intellectual life that did not need the spotlight to survive. In 2010, after many years away from primetime television, Mayim came back with a role that almost seemed like it had been written specifically with her in mind and nobody else. In Season 3 of The Big Bang Theory, she showed up as Amy Farrah Fowler, a highly intelligent neuroscientist who was socially awkward and communicated with such a blunt and unfiltered directness that it frequently created incredibly uncomfortable moments for everyone around her. At first, the character was only expected to show up briefly. It was meant to be a quick test, nothing more. But the way audiences responded changed absolutely everything about the plan. In those early episodes, Amy was basically a female version of Sheldon, cold, completely lacking in social skills, and genuinely hard for most people to feel any warmth toward at first. But instead of pulling her off the show, the writers gradually started adding emotional layers to the character. They built real friendships between Amy and Penny and Bernadette. They deepened and expanded her relationship with Sheldon in ways that felt surprising and real. Over the seasons, Amy slowly transformed from an experimental supporting character into the actual emotional heart of the entire series. That transformation did not happen fast. It was the result of many years of careful and steady refinement. The overlap between the character and her real life very quickly became one of the biggest talking points in the media. Mayim was not just playing a scientist on a TV show. She was actually a neuroscientist with a real PhD in real actual life. That gave the role a layer of genuine authenticity that almost nobody else could have brought to it. She did not need to fake her way through scientific terminology or pretend to understand concepts she had never actually studied. She had lived and breathed that world for years. She even helped review and correct certain technical details in the scripts to make sure the science was being handled properly. In an industry where actors routinely memorize terminology they have absolutely no real understanding of, this overlap between who she was on screen and who she genuinely was in real life created something that felt truly unique. The character and the real person were almost perfectly lined up with each other. During her time on the series, Mayim received 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series in 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. The Big Bang Theory became one of the most successful sitcoms of the entire 21st century, running for 12 full seasons from 2007 all the way to 2019, with an enormous global audience and massive amounts of money coming in from syndication deals around the world. In the later seasons, her position within the cast clearly shifted and grew in a way that everyone could see. When the main cast members went back to renegotiate their contracts, the top stars voluntarily agreed to give up a portion of their salaries so that other cast members, including Mayim and Melissa Rauch, could receive higher pay. That moment did not just reflect how financially successful the show had become. It showed very clearly that her role had grown way beyond being just an extra character filling space in the background. She had become an essential and structural part of the show during its most important years. The role of Amy Farrah Fowler did more than simply bring her back into the public eye. It lifted her to an entirely new level of recognition all around the world. Younger audiences who had never seen Blossom knew her as Amy. Older viewers who had grown up watching her in the 1990s remembered her as Blossom. 2 completely separate chapters of her career had now crossed paths and connected, creating a profile in the entertainment industry that almost nobody else could claim. An actress with 2 genuine career peaks that were nearly 2 full decades apart from each other.